But then the question really is, how do you write the most compelling stories and how do you communicate most effectively? One of the technique is very simple to ask, what is the one big idea? What is the one big idea? When you would deliver this story, what is the one big idea you want people to remember? Given that at least 90% of the content you communicate will be forgotten, right? If you don't believe me, just ask yourself, what did you eat for lunch 2 days ago? Most people don't remember, right? So, but if you ask the simple question, what is the one big idea? And then you say, what are the 3 to 5 sub ideas that support this big idea?
Mr. Wei, how are you doing today?
Doing really well. Pleasure meeting you.
A
I'm
pleasure to
really
have you
looking
on.
forward to this podcast.
Sounds good. So, if you ever meet someone at a restaurant or at a party and they come and ask you, what do you do? How do you respond?
What do I do? Wow, that is a loaded question. I think that question de depends on how I define myself. I think it depends on relationship, of course, right? If it's a business setting, I would say, well, I'm a technology executive. I lead, large scale technologies globally. But if it's more, let's say, church setting, I would say I'm a father of two daughters, happily married, and really deeply embedded into the community.
Yeah, one of the things I really liked about reading some of the responses you shared with me earlier is that you have multiple different definitions of success, where in one setting you're proud of your accomplishments through work, and in one setting you're proud of your accomplishments through your family, and another side there's something you define as a personal failure that you're proud that you haven't seen that. So,
Yeah.
how would you distinguish the different definitions of a success you have amongst the various aspects of your life?
Yeah, I think just like there are different roles that we play, and there are different aspects of life that really makes us happy, right? And I remember once in my high school, and my dad asked me, what is your vision of having a successful career? And back then the definition was, I really would like to be able to go to the grocery store and just buy what I want and not having to pay attention to the price, right? And later I begin to realize that it actually worked out really well when you have the financial freedom. So you don't run to the shopping mall because they're on sale, and but you buy what you need. Turn out financially it works out really, really good. And there's a little bit of story there too, is many years ago, my dad actually came over to the US to visit us. And I was driving back then a Jeep Grand Cherokee. I was perfectly happy with it. And my dad said, our whole family drives Mercedes. And do you recall you had a dream of driving a Mercedes? I said, no, I totally forgot about it. And that just tells you what is actually not important. Um, you know, on the other hand, I think the other elements of success is what really matters is having a rich family. I was just reflecting on what really makes me. I think it's one thing to have success, to create that impression of success. It's another thing to be able to really enjoy the fruit of success. And if I think about the things I really enjoy, is the fact that we have a very rich family life. And along the marriage, my wife and I have been together for more than 30 years. One of the very important transition that happened during the marriage was in the beginning, I felt that the love is a lot of what I call taking love. It felt very much transactional, right? I love you because you're pretty, you're kind, you're gentle. I love you because you're hardworking, you're responsible, you make money, and so on and so forth, right? Somewhere along this marriage, we both came to the same conclusion almost at the same time that we really want to be people that practice giving love. I'm kind to my wife because who I am. And I want her to live the life to the fullest of her potential. And the flip side is true that she loves me because who she is, and she chooses to be kind and patient and encouraging to me. And when you have this kind of dynamic, a rich family life, it really does make a huge difference. I think the other piece that I thought was really important is not so much about material things we actually possess, but privately living a debt-free life and having the ability to fire my boss if there's a need for it, and having that freedom to wake up in the morning and knowing that you have meaningful work ahead of you and be able to go to sleep every night and knowing you have done the best you can to fulfill your responsibility is hugely, satisfying.
Amazing. Yeah, you touched
Mhm.
on a lot of themes there. The theme of love, the theme of purpose in the second part as well. And I want to go and explore those. But first, I
Yeah.
want to go back to something you mentioned earlier related to money itself. I'm happy you distinguished that money is a very important thing, that it's given you a lot of freedom in your life. But at the same time, um, you don't have this like craving or need to always be driving the Mercedes or have that as like the vision forward for you. So I know you wrote the lesson that money is a great slave, but a terrible master. So how have you seen that manifest in your own life?
Yeah, I think, there's one great book called The Richest Person in Babylon. That's a very old book. And the idea is, before you pay everyone else, you should pay yourself first, right? And paying yourself is the idea of you save 10% at a minimum, and then the money was going to give birth to more money, such as dividends, interest rates, and so on and so forth. And all of a sudden, you have built a machine that generates additional wealth. So in this scenario, if you think about it, the money machine is actually going to create additional wealth for you. It becomes a perpetual machine, and it enables you to do a lot of good things, such as giving back to the community, supporting vulnerable children's their care, and be generous with the community, and but also taking care of yourself, like going to a gym on a regular basis, have the time, and have a really nice, enjoyable vacations, and so on and so forth. Money is a terrible master in a sense that a lot of times that I look at the people that I work with and they're so stressed out, they're in debt. I'm talking about people that actually make fairly significant amount of money, right? The only problem is as they succeeded more and more in life, as their income increased, their expenditure also increased. So paradoxically, they started moving to bigger, more expensive houses, therefore their debt increased. They drive very fancy cars, therefore there's a bigger payment, and so the debt actually becomes huge. So now they have to do the work that they've been asked to do, even though they don't enjoy it,
Mm,
right? And they became almost a slave to the money because the whole purpose of going to work is not so that they can fulfill the highest potential that they have been given, rather is to keep this money machine going, right? And in some ways, I describe this as you're playing the making the bank rich game, as opposed to playing the game of you living a rich life.
oh, it's a nice way to put it. Is a bookshelf in the background, is that a virtual background or is that like your real
Oh,
background?
that's actually my bookshelf. So I
I
have two,
saw
two, two office in the house, so I'm staying.
I saw
Yeah,
the book on your shelf, Mastery, which I also read last year, and I
mm,
think it describes the theme a lot of what we're talking about with the side of meaningful work. And
yeah.
it is a shame that a lot of people in life never find a way to access that meaningful work and find that for what that is for themselves. And I'm hoping that as years goes on, I can have a more and more of a clearer vision about what that is for me. But you always mention about the like waking up and having meaningful work ahead of you. So what do you
Right.
define as meaningful work? And does that mean that I need to find the perfect passion for me, or is it I can find meaning in any kind of work? So how do you define that?
What's really interesting is when I just got graduated out of college, right? And I used to think that life is a little bit like is that like this perfect movie? You have a master plan, you wake up, you have a perfect vision of what you want to accomplish. And that's why you spend so much time in choosing the right major and the right profession. And as I get older, I started realizing that so many things are truly out of our control. As a matter of fact, the biggest decisions affect my life and your life are typically not made by us. So, as example, right, we can choose to pursue our girlfriend, but she's the person that decides to marry us. We can choose to make an offer on a house, but the seller is going to decide if he or she's going to accept the offer. We can choose to apply for a job and do the best thing we can possibly do, but the person that is hiring makes a fit decision. And often that is entirely beyond our control. And there are many, many stories like that. And what I discovered as I get older is the most important thing to do is to do two things. One is a strategic flexibility. In other words, you have a clear vision, you wanted to deliver more value to the community, to the society, but not be overly fixed on, I'm an engineer, therefore that's all I do. And there's a lot of adjacent opportunities that opens up and where the skill sets can be, leveraged. But the second important piece is to do the most responsible thing for the work right ahead of ourselves. Like today, I have a meeting, and the question is not how do I close this deal? How do I, impress my boss? The real question is for me, how do I give the very best that that I can possibly give? Not so that I have a brand to communicate how great I am, but it's to put my talent and skills to the best use. Because the truth of the matter is we got to spend 24 hours anyhow, right? You can't save it. You can, so why not give the very, very best? So one of the practice I personally do is I try not to do too many things. But every day in the morning, when I wake up, I try to think 3 to 5 things that are important for today. And then when I'm doing those 3 to 5 things, I'm totally focused. So I try to shut out emails and text messages and create those windows where I'm absolutely focused. And paradoxically, outside of these windows, smaller windows during the day, I actually have a lot of flexibility in having a conversation, brainstorming, and connecting new dots. So to me, a meaningful life ultimately boils down to doing what you're supposed to do and trusting that life will create new opportunities. And then when the opportunity presents ourselves, to really have the courage to step through those doors that are now opened. And I do think, just on that side note, what I also realized is there are more doors to be opened, to be closed by ourselves. We tend to close more doors ourselves than the doors that are closed by others. I was talking to a young lady because I'm mentoring her, and she said, "Oh, I'm doing this internship. I'm just, I really felt like throughout the day I may get stuck here and there, and I don't know if I need to go to my boss and ask for help. And so I'm gonna go to my boss to ask if I could approach him." And I said, "Why do you need to ask for permission to get what you need to get your job done? Why don't you frame the question as during the day, when is a good time I can reach out to you to ask for support? And do you prefer text or emails?" See, this is small mindset, right? Because we already felt that we need to close the door and hoping somebody may be kind enough to open that door, versus with this mindset that if I'm doing the right thing, what my responsibility calls for us to do, why not assume the door is open and walk through it? But when you walk through it, be thoughtful, be gentle, be kind.
Amazing. So talk to me about your earlier life. So when you were early on, when you were younger, like where did you grow up and how, when you talk about your passion in technology, when did you see that start to develop?
Yeah, I have never dreamed of me one day being a, chief technology officer, a chief operating officer running a software company. So a lot of accident actually happened. So I grew up in Shanghai. When I finished high school, I ended up going to Germany to get my high school graduation. I went to the Technical University in Berlin
That was
and
for high
co
school. So high school was in Germany or?
high school the last year, the last 1 year to get the gymnasium, and then I went to the Technical University in Berlin, and I was studying electrical engineering. And there is a little bit of story here that so my roommate, when I came over to the US, I signed up to start my electrical engineering, and the semester already started. But my roommate said, "John, I really think you should go study, computer information systems." And back then, I thought, computers. You know, I'm not that smart. I'm not into computers. I'm here to study electrical engineering. But he was bugging me literally every day. And finally, he took me over to see the dean, and the dean said, "Hey, if you make that decision to come over, I will take care of all the transfers." The dean is new to the department and wanted to grow the department. So that's how I made that career transfer. But as soon as I started studying computer, and I realized this is significantly simpler because a lot of the programming language we're already doing in electrical engineering because we're programming network cards, we're doing mathematical models that are programmed in Fortran and Pascal, C. So it was not a hard transfer. But see, this is another example where I kind of closed my own door, assumed that computer science would not actually apply and I'm the wrong fit. Fortunately, my roommate saw it and created that opportunity for me. And and by the way, just on a happy note, I reconnected with my roommate after 20 plus years, and he's now a very senior executive at a very large bank. And I called him up and said, "Hey, why did you do what you did?" And he said, "I do not know." And on the other hand, I realized that the reason where he is, leading a very large organization that's technology driven in financial services, is because he was not going about life as how do I grab more for me? He had a genuine care for seeing the talent and putting the talent into the right use and the right growth curve. And so after that, I just started developing, started working as a developer, architect, kind of traditional career. But I would say one of the things I always try to do is try to do the work going from ordinary to extraordinary. So the difference between ordinary and extraordinary really is this little extra. So one of the things that this little extra, I'll give you one example. So I was actually programming a order entry system. And it's fairly complicated because there's a lot of business rules that ties to, all the different fields and how they're calculated and so on and so forth. So, and back then I was learning HTML when it first came out, the website was kind of cool. And I just made a decision that I'm going to take this entire user requirements and produce a, HTML workbook. And guess what happened? In part of the process doing that, I kind of became the business expert, knowing the very granular details of how the systems and all the entry systems supposed to work. And I remember I had a menu that's literally about 1 foot tall, and I turned that into a HTML site for training, and that really took me out of the kind of classic developer coder's role into somebody who is a coder, but actually can relate and communicate with the business. So that just broadened my career path forward naturally.
Amazing. One of the things I like that you say a lot is you kind of simplify life by saying that just do what you need to be doing, get that done, or transition
Yeah.
from just doing something ordinary to extraordinary. We're basically the mindset of do the best you can, make the good decisions, and embrace the flexibility of life. And I think that's such a useful mentality to have because I've seen in my peers and even myself in past years that at the stage we're at right now at high school, going into college, there's a lot of confusion as in like where will my life be going next? And you kind of want to plan it out as you said, the perfect movie, like do this and do this and do this and have the perfect avenue to this expectation or this location that we all want to be. But at the same
Yeah.
time, we have these weird peculiarities to ourselves and we have these weird interests, but because we can't see that really translate into something that's on paper, we tend to close those doors as well, and then we limit ourselves further. Um, so I really like the mindset you bring up of just take each day, just make a decision and do the best you can. Because I think
Yes.
if you do that and you're open to new ideas and you're trying to open as many doors as you can, I think you kind of shape your own path in a way where you take like this aspect of myself and this back aspect of myself, and it ends up 10, 20 years on the line just formulating into its own unique thing that really isn't on paper anywhere. And
Yeah.
with you, and you started with electrical and engineering, and then you found this avenue that took you into computer systems, and then you're going into business on this side, and you kind of just follow the path. And I find that most of the successful people that I've spoken to, including yourself, no one really knew where they were going, but they made a
That is so true.
decision
Yeah.
early on that, we'll just take this one step at a time and we'll see where that takes us.
Yeah. I think asking the question of what is the next best action, really is a critical question to ask. And paradoxically, if you work at a bank and the way we design the systems, we often say, if a customer comes to our bank website, what is our next best proposal we want to put in front of the customer? There's so many smart people that are designing those digital banking experience for our customers. And I think a lot of these principles can be applied even into our individual life. Asking the question, what is the next best action, right? So if we're in let's say we're just having a tough day with our spouse, and it's easy just to respond. But if you just take a moment and pause and to say, what is the next best action? And it's not hard to figure out that perhaps the next best action is to show kindness and patience and just to create that space that our spouse can feel safe and well rested, right? So I think asking that question, what is the next best action, tends to simplify a lot of the decisions.
Yeah, and I love anyone who tries to simplify anything because I think with computers and online media and so many different voices telling you what to do, we just
Yeah.
overcomplicate everything we do, and that's been my problem as well. I tend to be a little bit of an overthinker, and then I think about this thing I heard here and this thing I heard here, but I found that when I try to simplify as much as possible in my life, just going down
Mhm.
to the most simplest, the simplest answer I found was usually right. And just doing that, keeping it easy, simple, and just taking it slow is I think recently helped me better to make better decisions and try to set
Yeah.
myself up for a better direction.
So maybe I can share a tip with you because as you get into more the, professional career, right? And a big part of that professional career is communications, right? And it's telling the story. And it turned out the ones with the sickest PowerPoint deck is not the best communicator usually, right? But then the question really is, how do you write the most compelling stories and how do you communicate most effectively? One of the technique is very simple to ask, what is the one big idea? What is the one big idea? When you would deliver this story, what is the one big idea you want people to remember? Given that at least 90% of the content you communicate will be forgotten, right? If you don't believe me, just ask yourself, what did you eat for lunch 2 days ago? Most people don't remember, right? So, but if you ask the simple question, what is the one big idea? And then you say, what are the 3 to 5 sub ideas that support this big idea? So what am I doing here is I'm actually essentially creating a summary page. One big idea, 3 to 5 sub-bullets, right? And just make that, and when you start telling the story, you want to get the first big idea out in the first 30 seconds, right? It's almost like you're buying a birthday card for your spouse. And the reason you buy the card is because there's usually a tagline that is just very, very specific, right? And speaks to your spouse. And that is the big idea, right? Get the big idea out. And when you conclude your presentation, say the same idea again. But this is the simple technique of what I call building the wireframe, and then you can fill in the details. And the details will always get filled in. So long you work hard, you have reasonable work ethics, you think logically. But often, the bigger challenge is often we do the wrong thing with incredible due diligence, only finding out we're on the wrong path, right? So setting the right path, uh, uh, try to simplify without being simplistic. It's actually a real skill to nurture.
Do you ever apply the framework of the one big idea beyond even presentations and communication and maybe to your life as a whole, where you try to focus on maybe one big idea and have other aspects of it contribute to that?
Yes, I know. I would say I think but if I just step back and look at life, right? And one big idea is the death rate of human being is 100%, right? So if you think about that big idea, no one lives forever, and our tenure on Earth is relatively short. What does that really mean? It means that 3 to 5 things that are really, really important, right? So you can almost kind of work backwards and create those sub-big ideas, and that shapes the choices we make, right?
Maybe.
So, and I was literally really talking about, with my daughter, I was having a dialogue yesterday on the value of being authentic, for example, right? And one of the things we talked about is, why would anyone want to be so successful that he and she no longer can afford to be himself or herself? You know, isn't that a tragedy that you succeeded, but you lost yourself? And what do you have left to buy your own self back, right? So sometimes that big idea can have real implications on the type of choices you make. And then, and just another application of this big idea, right? Because a lot of times the reason why it's very hard to be ourselves is because we try to relate. We try to join, we try to connect. We try to not be on the bad side of the broader population. But let's just think this mathematically out, right? Statistically, the likelihood of another person that thinks and have the same life experience that I do is less than 1%, right? So all of a sudden, because the assumption that I have made around how other people perceive of me, and now I have tuned and customized my being and my behaviors and thoughts to such a degree that I have narrowed to a target audience of less than 1%. Just think about how narrow that opportunity is. On the other hand, if I'm being authentic, being truthful, and just being who I am, and the story never gets better than the truth, and I will never get better than the authentic, who I am. And all of a sudden, let's say 40% of the people don't like you. 40%. Okay. Now, if you focus on the 40%, you get stressed out because you just feel like, wow, there's so many people that doesn't like me. Maybe I could do say this more carefully. But the reality is also 60% of the people are looking at you more favorably. So all of a sudden you're playing this game 60% versus 1%. Guess who has a broader opportunity? Because if you just think mathematically, it actually makes sense to be authentic, right? And but the flip side also, it also creates another implication. To be authentic, it means that we have a reason to elevate and for us to strive to be a better human being. Because if you are authentic, it means you also see clearly our human weakness, and then we have a obligation to grow, right? To grow, become more mature, more gentle, more kind, more just, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I've noticed that pattern even in the creator space as well for podcasts. I've seen that
Yeah,
there can sometimes be creators that have such a large following, and sometimes there are creators that maybe have a small following. But I've noticed that the success of the creator is often not even correlated to the number of followers they have because they might one follower might appeal to the mass and they might have like 100 million followers. But how many of
yeah,
those followers are like really true fans that they're like diehard fans of that person compared to maybe one individual who's a more authentic creator, and he only appeals to 1% of the population. Very small. But even if you do the math with 8 billion people, 1% of the population is a huge number of people as well.
yeah,
But those people are not just general fans, they'll be like die-hard fans that will you'll probably end up making more money and success by focusing on your authentic self and authentic desires and appealing even to like a smaller proportion of people. But
yeah,
one question I had was I think it's hard to define like what the authentic self really is, especially as you get older and you have more like confirmation bias and more things that have been patterns in you since you were a child and maybe voices from childhood that are still in your head. I think how would you describe like what it means to be authentic to someone like who maybe be struggling to decide like is this something that I really want or is it something for someone else? Because we are so group oriented as creatures as you described. It's
yeah.
just baked into our evolution that we need to conform. Like this is a hard like desire baked inside of us that we need people to like us. So how do you think we can access that authentic self coupled with this?
Yeah, so I think motivation is very important because two people can be doing exactly the same thing, but coming from a different motivation. One motivation is to impress others. You know, I did this hard work. I worked overnight to get this presentation just right. But I come here. The reason I did that is because I'm trying to create a brand for myself, and I'm trying to impress you. And but another motivation is to say that I really love what I'm doing here, and that is what I'm meant to do, and I want to do the best job possible. And it will create a totally different outcome over a period of time. So one of the story my dad actually told me when I was young, and um, I'm not so sure how this story kind of applies to a broader population, but it left a deep impression on me personally. My dad said there are two kids. One kid grew in a upper middle class family, and another kid grew up in a really poor family. Um, the general thinking is we all want that poor kid to win, right? So in this story, the poor kid actually win because he went to college, he got his college degree, got a fantastic job, and the first time in his life, he bought a brand name, really fancy leather shoe, cost $500. So when he goes to work, he just lift his foot a little bit higher because he wants to let people see what expensive brand name, clothing and shoes he now can afford, right? And you have another kid that grew up in you know a more well situated family. That kid also went to college, perhaps lesser accomplished, and because they both work in the same office environment, and he bought the same shoes, but he doesn't even realize he's wearing expensive shoes because he grew up in that environment. It's just the way how it is. So he was comfortable to wear sneakers, non-brand name shoes as wearing a brand name shoes. He doesn't even notice. And one day the time comes for these two individuals to give a presentation, to be interviewed by the board, to be appointed as a CEO. Who do you think is going to be the more confident walking in and making that human connection and get a story out? Is the one that always try to impress others and begging for recognition, or is the kid that walked into the room and felt that this is his destiny, right? So my dad's encouragement in this case was be that kids who grew up in a better family and don't pay attention to those material things, but pay attention of who you are. So paradoxically, by being humble, by not paying attention to those material things, you actually become more courageous. And you almost have a sense of entitlement in a positive sense. Of course, I'm geared to do this job well. Of course, even though I'm stressed now because I never led a team as big as this before, but of course I will figure this out because I'm willing to work hard for it and look at the past journeys I have traveled through. And that's the difference.
Got it. I want to return to you mentioned in the beginning that one of the biggest themes of your life is like giving love. And that's something that's really important to you as well. And I've seen that it's manifested in different ways in your life, such as
Yeah.
love for your family. You mentioned that you have a very close family you're very proud of. You said
Yeah.
love at first sight and love at the refugee camp. So I was wondering, you said you'd expand more on some of these stories. So how about we begin by talking about this theme of love and what it really means to you?
Yeah, so love really became more and more important in a tangible way. So when I went to college, literally I saw my wife, girlfriend back then. Well, I saw her literally love on the first sight. When I saw her, I knew I'm going to marry her. And there was a problem because I was already, applying for applying to go to Germany, and we were in Shanghai, and so I remember about 1 year into dating, and I was about to leave. My wife and I, we had a prayer. So our prayer was either she can come after me, or I would graduate very quickly in Germany and go back to Shanghai. I would go to her city, where she did not grow up in Shanghai. She came from a middle of the country. Now, what was not part of the choice is we would part our ways because we're too far apart. And well, life actually worked out. So she was able to come, and through some very unique circumstances. And my parents were so nice that they actually helped my wife to come to Germany, sponsor her, even before we were married, and which is unusual. And how that trust was developed is a little bit beyond comprehension looking back. So, and that was the first time that I really felt the power of love. Like when you have a true love, and what is impossible, what is illogical, really becomes possible, and you actually make it work. I think the second story is in 2009, and I was just about a year into becoming the chief operating officer of a software company. We were publicly traded, and every quarter was growing double digits, very successful. Then 2008 hit when the market crashed. All of a sudden, I look at my pipeline. I mean, literally the entire sales pipeline just disappeared. Okay. So I went to Germany, had a board meeting, and the board basically said, hey, uh, 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 we're a German company. We don't just lay off people like you Americans. And I was thinking, oh, good. So we're going to make some adjustment on my, performance targets. No, no, you still have to live to the targets. I was, as a matter of fact, so stressed out. I literally told my friends that I felt that I was in such a pressure cooker. I need to get out, just like physically get out. So one person just said, "Hey, John, there's a team that's going to a refugee camp in Egypt, just helping out the refugees out of Sudan. Do you want to just be part of the team?" I was like, "Sure, sign me up." Never been there before, and landed. And this was a time when cellular internet was not very common. So it's quite expensive, actually. And I remember, working in the camp for about uh, a little over a week, and every day. And I just felt such an overwhelming responsibility, yeah, caring for the refugees and making sure they have the hygiene kits and so caring for them. I literally forgot. It's almost astonishing how you could be so immersed in something, but when you're taken out of that environment and you're faced the real needs, and all of a sudden I realized that plenty of people would love to exchange their best days for my worst days. I became incredibly thankful and all of a sudden realized the problem that I was having are really not that important. So I took 2 weeks later, about 2 weeks later, I took the plane, was flying back to the US. I thought my career was over. Because and by the time I landed, to my own amazement, the company's doing fine because all the deals that we signed over the past 2 years started generating maintenance revenues, which I totally forgot. And on the way back, we also realized that the software technology we develop for manufacturers, if we just pivot, is actually the perfect technology for feeding the data into the e-commerce website. So we went from targeting manufacturers to targeting, chief marketing officers. And that year we actually ended with, a record revenue in the middle of a down market. So there's two stories, right? They both have a happy ending, but in both cases is choosing love and living love and experiencing love. And I do think that one of my classmates during the college time, one of the things he often reminds me is to say, especially when you go through a difficult and challenging time, take a moment to find the beauty in your life, whether it's somebody's kindness or a beautiful flower or a beautiful landscape, and connect to that beauty and enjoy it, and develop your inner love and passion for it, and you'll be amazed how the life situation will evolve. The world indeed is bigger than we think.
Amazing. Another lesson I can look at there is the importance of perspective, because I think
Mhm.
another part of our nature is to become so narrowly focused into solving a problem that I guess we lose sight of like all the other pieces that kind of contribute to maybe the
Yeah,
problem. And it's really cool how you were able to get the opportunity to step away for such a period of time, and how, I mean, you must have, when you came back, just had your eyes open, like you just all of a sudden see like the different parts that you might have not seen before, just because I think that it's important that we step away from like our day-to-day life that we become so used to and so laser focused in, and try to find new perspective. And
yeah.
it's also useful even like physically moving out. It's I've seen even in my own life, like last summer when I was doing an internship in New Hampshire for 6 weeks, and just spending that much time away from my day-to-day routine here in Jersey that I've lived here all my life, is it really opens your eyes for sure.
Yeah, I do think that, I do think from time to time to give to the community, to help people that absolutely can do nothing back for us is actually really, really important, healthy for the soul. So since that trip, I've been to many, many of those trips. Uh, one of the things unique about those trips is often when I go on vacation, when I come back, I felt like I needed another vacation for the vacation. Whereas those trips where we give out to the community, I just come back and feel very energized. There's a mental clarity, new ideas come about, and and in this sense, the ability to live a outflowing uh, life of love, a life of outflowing love, is a very important part of a healthy, successful living.
You wrote that you're proud about the health you've achieved in your life, both physical and mental. And I found that interesting because I know I've met a lot of people that either laser focus on the physical side of it and try to become as physically healthy as possible. And some people just focus solely on the mental health piece of it. But it's amazing how you have managed to achieve both of them. And I definitely think that in our life, we need both mental health and physical health. So how do you think, what advice would you give to someone who wants to develop that? And how do you develop both simultaneously?
Yeah, I think it's very hard to do just given, the pressure of life, right? And pressure of responsibilities. But having us being married to a person that shares similar values, right? And I always go back to uh, fundamentally what do we need, right? If you go back to I think in America, one of the beautiful things about America is we live in a prosperous country, a big country with lots of opportunities. If you want to be healthy, you can go to Whole Foods and buy healthy food. It is more expensive than a regular grocery store. But if you think about how much we pay for food relative to our income, US is actually has one of the lowest ratio, right? So for the most people, it's actually affordable. But we have to change the way how we think about where we make the investment. One of the analogy, for example, I encourage people is to say, well, if you eat healthy, you just live 2 years longer than you otherwise. You would have made the doctors poor, but just the Social Security would have paid more for all the food you would eat by getting 2 years extra of Social Security payments, right? Um, but the other part is developing this important routine and habits, so it becomes automatic. And I would just say that it is true, not all the jobs are compatible with a healthy living, both physically and mentally. And I do think somewhere along the way, it is important to figure out that the leader you're working for or working with, um, uh, is he or she trying to use you, or is he or she trying to build you up and make you more valuable so that you can contribute more to the organization? And if you happen to be working with a leader with a value extraction kind of mindset, and you really have to counterbalance that. And with if you're paying if the price to pay is your health, both physical and mental, and you should make a decision, conscious decision, if truly that is the price you're willing to pay, right? And I think a lot of folks are so tired and they really don't carve out the time to reflect and think about those choices we're making. And I think this is where good habits really matter, right? Good habits of uh, uh, taking the moments, getting on those trips, outside of the daily routine, and having time to think and reflect on why we do what we do. And I give you one example. It occurred to me just by accident, actually. I remember one time, in that case, the boss was a wonderful boss, great guy. Just really enjoyed working and reporting to him. And I remember one Sunday he called me up and he said, "Hey, I need you to work on this, quote really quickly." And frankly, that particular piece needs to be done early next week. But he was concerned of us not getting that done in time. So I already plan on getting up really early in the morning on Monday and get that taken care of. So I said, "Oh yeah, don't worry. I will. I already plan to get up really early on Monday morning. I will take care of it, and I'll give you an update on Monday night." Then he just jokingly, he was not being mean or anything. He just jokingly said, "Hey, by the way, just so you know, you do work for me." And out of nowhere, and I wasn't really planned for, and I just said, "No, I don't work for you. I work for no, that's not how I said. I said, yes, I work for you, but also be clear, I will change my job before I change my family." I just said it. After I said it, and I reflected on this dialogue, and I said, it is actually true. I do not work for that gentleman. I report to that gentleman. I truly work for me and my family. And truly, it does not make sense for me to change my family and before I change my job. Why? We live in a beautiful large countries with so many opportunities, and why would I make that trade? Um, so actually, what happened is the following week when I went to work, and I actually told the people that are reporting to me, and I said, I want to be clear that none of you guys work for me because that's not the truth. You report to me, and you work for yourself and your family. And therefore, in the middle of the meeting, I want everybody to really pay attention, be inclusive, be engaged. But if your family call you, take that call. Just step out, take that call. Don't rush your spouse. Have that conversation come back. And it really changed my mindset, how I engage with my leadership team now today. So my mindset, ever since I come to this recognition, it also took a lot of pressure off me because all of a sudden I realized that as a leader, my role is to come alongside of my team to create more oxygen, create more light in the conversation for my team to perform better, as opposed to take all the oxygen out of the room so they can't breathe, they're under stress, and I can try to squeeze them more. And frankly, that's a very unproductive leadership style that fundamentally also does not work over extended period of time.
And I'm sure that if you have that improved relationship with your team and you tell them that prioritize your family, you're working for them, I'm sure that also improves like their passion for the work they do and their involvement. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that you actually ultimately achieve better results that way.
Absolutely. Because I think we have a natural tendency to think that, just by putting in extra hours, we would be more productive, right? If I'm putting, let's say, 2 hours extra, everybody else is working 10 hours a day. I'm doing 12 hours. So by definition, I'm a little over 20, I'm a little less than 20% more productive, right? So that's the general thinking. Okay. So here's the fallacy of that thinking. Um, at that human scale, it means that your productivity at best is 60% more because you need some time to sleep, you need some time to eat, right? And on a sustained basis, even if you are a superhuman, you're only working 16 hours a day. Okay. And so 60% more. So if you think about a person that is fresh out of college, if you say, well, at best, your future at best is you will deliver 60% more value. That's at best. So at best, your future income will be 60% more than what you do. How many people would consider that as a great success? But if you flip that thinking differently, think about the college experience we had. Think about the last 2 days before the college exam. It feels like you are learning in that 2 days, half semester of learning. Think about if you created a situation that you are disciplined, you're well managed, you have clarity on what you need to accomplish, because that's really the value of exam. You have a very singular, defined, time-bound goal. And when you get into that zone of focusing on that goal, if you can really get your mind to be absolutely focused, think about how much more productive you can be. You're not talking about 60% more productive. You're talking about 300, 400, 500. Now, what if by being so focused in a defined time frame, you actually create a space to expose yourself to, experiences that other people wouldn't have? So you brought more ingredients into this focused productivity time, and the value creation is limitless. You will come up with, and by the way, one of the things I do is I try to write an article, every week. And part of that is just because when you write something down, it tends to uh, crystallize the thinking. And out of that thinking, often strategy emerge, tactical plan emerge, and so on and so forth. Now, it used to take me a lot of time to write. Today, I tell you what I do is I actually don't spend a lot of time on writing. Usually what happens is throughout the day, as ideas come to me, I just physically write it down. I will say, what's the big idea? What are the three sub-ideas? Why do I think these are the valid ideas? What are the life stories, experiences that led me to this idea? So I would kind of challenge and just let the idea naturally kind of cook a little bit, right? But I don't physically type. I just usually you will see like a half-page bullet style. But once I feel the idea has matured enough, if I'm writing, I will be entirely focused. 30 minutes, nothing. I'm just in that focused box, and I will get that 3 page typed up. And usually within an hour, including editing time. So that's one of the little productivity technique that I developed over time.
Amazing. Building off of that, you also mentioned that there's some automatic habits you've tried to integrate into your life for the sake of like the theme of the physical health and the mental health. So talk to me more about some of the other things you do to help you achieve that goal in terms of the habits or everyday routines.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Frankly, these are not my ideas. These are the ideas that I learned from others. One of the things I try to do is every day in the morning before I even brush my teeth, I take a few moments and reflect on just really quiet time to reflect on, what are the 3, 5 things that I should do for today to be successful. And um, and I will physically write that down so that when the day gets really crazy, and I tell a little story. When I first became a senior manager, and so I went to work, I came home, and my wife was like, "How does it feel like to be the senior manager?" Because all the way up to that point, I always had a technical, kind of career path, right? Developer, architect, senior architect. I came home, I said, I don't know, because today I absolutely did nothing. Yet I'm totally exhausted. I don't even know why am I exhausted. And what I realized is that exhaustion comes from the subconscious awareness that truly nothing has happened and really accomplished. All I did was attending different meetings. I have not really solved the problems of substance. So what I try to do is by writing it down, it really helps me to have a very, very tangible, clear goals to get this down so I can declare every day a success. So if it happens to be an easy day, I have a lot of space in the calendar, I still can, go to sleep and feel like I have accomplished something very concrete. But also on a busy day, and it also helped me to figure out what is the true north, what truly matter, what are just a lot of busy work that you do have to do, right? And so that's one habit. I think another habit is called a 5 minutes rule. And so when I was in my late 20s, I had a team member. I noticed that he is unusually productive. And I asked him, like, you always appear to be quite relaxed, but I'm amazed how productive you are compared to the other team members. How do you do that? He said, well, my father-in-law taught me this 5 minutes rule. And I was like, what is this 5 minutes rule? He said, in your daily kind of course, in the course of daily lives, you generally have those responsibilities that takes longer than 5 minutes and less than 5 minutes. Okay. So for the thing that takes longer than 5 minutes, what you do is you actually find a spot on the calendar and on when you plan on doing it. You just put it on the calendar. plan on doing it. Sometimes you don't have, very long. I mean, sometimes you have tasks that takes 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So what you do is you bundle them together, you park them on the calendar. Because the moment your mind subconsciously knows that this responsibility will be taken care of at a given time, your mind is at ease. Because otherwise, you are literally consuming the computing power of your mind to keep track of these things. The second thing is for the things that do not take even 5 minutes to do, right? You need to call somebody to say, hey, please reschedule this meeting, or hey, I want to give you a heads up. The easiest thing to do is pick the phone, make that call, or do a quick IM, and that way it's done. You don't need to keep track of it anymore, right? So, and I would just say along the way, I would add another tip is be very careful with email,
Yeah.
because email has this illusion of, I'm throwing this thing over the wall, right? So I'm getting a peace of mind for a couple hours until that person responds. But you really have to realize that email a lot of times pays negative interest rate, because if you haven't thought through and you just throw over the wall, it's a very long tail on that communication back and forth and back and forth.
You said throw the wall. Is that like going back and forth on email, trying to get a
Yeah,
date?
back and forth on the emails, right? And you just created a long ping pong ball game. And all of a sudden, what can be taken care of in 10 minutes ended up costing you 40 minutes. And the problem is because it's going back and forth, every time it's only taking 5 minutes. Your mind's, you create this illusion. I'm done with 5 minutes. I'm having peace. But what you have really done is you build a snowball, and it's rolling. It becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So developing this conscious mind and looking through different threads of conversation and to detect early on what are the things that will take, realistically a good chunk of time, and to really organize a working meeting. And so so today I can tell you, have you noticed that when I first started my career, I just noticed that for whatever reason, all my meeting takes exactly 1 hour long, and magically, all the conversation takes exactly 1 hour, just right before we're about to conclude the meetings. And then one day I had this wild idea. I said, why don't I do an experiment? I literally went to my executive assistant. I said, I like all my meetings to be half hour by default, unless you are authorized to do more than a half hour. Ideally 25 minutes, so I actually have a little bit time between the meetings to do the context switching. Guess what happened? I've been doing this for quite a few years now. Half-hour meeting works just fine. And paradoxically, now I can actually afford to have 2 hour meetings, 4 hour meetings on a single topic where we can get deep and get a lot of really productive thinking together, and actually build something very, very concrete.
Amazing. Yeah,
So
these are incredible tools with the 5 minute rule and watching your email, because I definitely think that if you don't, I don't know, take conscious action of trying to deal with this, it can very easily build up in your day, right? But I think a lot of people have this illusion of productivity as well in the corporate world, where they might not realize it, but checking the email maybe every 5 minutes adds up to so much of the workday, just in like busy work that maybe could have been finished in an hour in the evening, right? And
yeah,
your attention is constantly jumping from here to here to here. It's you're less productive with your work. And I saw it at a smaller scale in myself at the school level, because in my sophomore year, I used to work a lot in the library, and I noticed that I'd sit down. I don't have a clear task defined for my work. I'm kind of just doing homework, and I'll go through Canvas and see whatever assignments there are and just do whatever I feel like doing. Oh, and then I'll talk to this person here. Then I'll go buy a snack over here. I'll check my email very quickly. And for some reason, my homework would take me so long, and I couldn't understand why. But I think starting to understand like how this illusion of productivity works, like checking your email is not always productive and trying to
Yeah.
time block it better, I was able to reduce my homework from taking 4 hours per day to just an hour a day by my senior year.
Mm,
And I
mm,
think the strategies to find like these are actually some of these I haven't heard about before, but like the 5 minute one that I'm excited to try out as well because I think there's
yeah.
so many different ways if you're just conscious about it and know that these things are eating at my time slowly in the background. And the thing is
Yeah.
that you don't even see it because so much of it's subconscious and you don't realize it. But they definitely, if people can learn from you and implement these in their life, I'm sure they'll see a lot of success in themselves.
Mm, mm. Very good. Very good.
So to close out, I want to go through some more of your lessons that you wrote down.
Mm,
So I'll mention one of your lessons. We can have a brief discussion about it, and we'll get through as many as we can.
yeah. Okay.
So first one, when you are young, working hard is a blessing. When you are
Yeah.
old, if you must work hard, it is a curse. So make a deal with life, working as hard as you can when you're young and able.
Yeah. So there's a little story there. So when I was in college, and all of a sudden I decided, I realized there's a value in in having friends that are much older than I am because they're ahead of me. They have more experience. They travel through the road, right? So I became friends with this older gentleman. He's retired. This was in Germany. He's a branch manager before he retired. But when you work at a bank, if you're a branch manager, you have the title of VP. And every time I see him, even though he's retired, I mean, granted, this was almost 30 years ago. It's a different time, right? So he was always wearing a suit with beautifully, perfect tie, and he drives a nice car, and we'll go for lunch together. And like the picture of him for me back then was the vision of success, right? Because when you're a student, like a VP at a bank is like a big deal. It's like it's different, a little bit different now. So we sat down with him, and that's the story he told me. He said, when you are young, working hard is a blessing because you have the energy, you have the creativity, you got to spend hours anyhow. But when you're old, you have to spend, it becomes a curse, right? Because your energy level is not there. And therefore, you make a deal with life, work as hard as you can, right? And I tell you a funny story. As I remember, I was running a software company, and we actually have a really good work-life balance program. We care about our employees. But this is a young man just graduated out of college, right? And he asked a question like toward the end. I was you know, like, do you have one last question you want to ask? He said, yeah, what is your work-life balance program? And I just laughed. I said, well, it's really hard to have work-life balance when you don't have a work and all you have is life. So I think you probably need to get on getting a work first, and then we can work with you to figure out the work-life balance. So the story here is I think there's no glory of how to say this. I think in order to have productive rest, you actually have to have lived productive life first. And that would actually make productive rest more meaningful and productive, paradoxically. So my encouragement is why I'm never going to be as young as now, right? So I try to work as hard as I can, but but now I would add one more point to say, do not go beyond that.
Yeah,
Do not go beyond that. So because you can take a principle and go too far.
got it. Next
Yeah.
one. Your greatest weakness is your greatest strength, and your greatest strength is your greatest weakness.
Yeah, so here's another story there. So I'm going to expand this just through stories, right? So, so I was a lead consultant at Volkswagen, and this is when the new Beetle, Volkswagen just introduced the new Beetle, and the hottest model is the silver or yellow Beetle. And I was in charge of the program. We actually did some application coding to do allocation of the inventory, for the dealerships, and because the sales number of the Volkswagen Beetle has surged so much, it was actually creating a supply chain challenge. So I was the lead consultant. Volkswagen brought all the directors coming in and to help me facilitate a process reengineering workshop, right? So the process can become more efficient, and we also want to be more equitable so that smaller dealers still have a chance to get, the allocation of the hot models, right? And I remember that day I was going to go in there because not being, I didn't grow up here. I was not born here in the US. And my English skills still developing. And, I looked really young. And of course, I got there first, right? I got there first. And I tried to get the workshop set up, the agenda set up, and the whiteboard set up. And here, the directors that they're normally like mid-aged men, right? So it's a little bit intimidating. And they walked in. The first gentleman was really nice to me. He tried to reach out to me, have a conversation, and he concluded, said, "Hey, are you the intern here? How long is your intern?" He just assumed I'm the intern, and I was so deeply discouraged. But then I remembered a different story. And that story allowed me to strengthen myself. We ended up having one of the best workshops, I was told. They have attended for a long time and really made a difference to the business. But let me tell you the story. I was at a conference and one lady just stopped me. I looked the way how she was very well dressed, just in the conference. I'm thinking, oh, another sales lady that's stopping me. I don't have time for it. And so I took the card and I just didn't even think about it. Just went home. And then after the conference, I got a stack of the card. I gave to my secretary and she kind of put in the computer system. I look at her name. I was like, her last name is Jakobsen. That's a very unusual last name. And I called her up and I said, by any chance, you know Eva Jakobsen? She said, yeah, that's my dad. Now, by the way, if you study computer science, Eva Jakobsen is three amigos that developed the modern computer science series, unified modern language, object-oriented programming, all came from, the three gentlemen, and they just sold the company for $2 billion to IBM, and this is more than 20 years ago. Okay, so I invited, of course, through her, I invited Eva Jakobsen to come to speak at our company. And well, a person of that stature certainly does not need a pre-qualification, right? But when he came, having lived in Europe for many, many years, I just never met a European that speaks English so poorly. Uh, um, and I actually felt a bit embarrassed. He was very witty, actually. He was very extremely witty. So one person asked a question to say, "Oh yeah, all that computer science story kind of makes sense. Guess what? My customer always want the software project to be done half the budget, half the time. What do you do?" His answer was brilliant. His answer was, "Well, then your customer deserve what they deserve." Um, but guess what happened? So that event passed away, and I almost felt I need to apologize to the people because it was very kind of technical. It was very his communication was really I mean, it's like exact opposite of a polished, well-prepared presentation. But the most strange thing happened. Like after the event, every month somebody would come to me and say, "Hey, when are you gonna bring Eva back? When are you gonna bring Eva back?" And I was like, Eva Jakobsen is not a common name. Everybody remembered his name. And everybody remembered the key points he spoke of. Then I realized what happened is because his name is so unusual, it made it easy for people to remember. And because his English was not fluent, and he was speaking in a foreign language, so he actually slowed down and forced the audience to pay attention to him. And therefore, people actually understood the essence, what he's trying to say. And he was brilliant underneath of that. And therefore, people remembered him, and he made such a deep impression.
Wow.
And now I realize the fact that, my last name is unusual for Americans is a tremendous advantage. It made it easy for people to remember me. And because I'm young, I'm not perfect, and made it easier for people to show me kindness and willing to share more with me. And it was paradoxically about 2 years after that, I went to library and I picked up a book. It's written by a Swedish doctor, and as he was in the process of passing away, he wrote this for his son, and it started with the Swedish wisdom and said, "Too soon old, too young smart." And this is the book title. And one of the wisdom is your greatest weakness is also your greatest strength. Your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness, and be mindful of that.
Amazing. So your story really highlights the first part, right? That your greatest weakness can help you stand out in a way to develop into a strength. What about the second part of it? So when you say that your greatest strength can be your greatest weakness, the way I interpreted that when I first read it was that maybe you become so confident and in this one skill you might have that you don't give it as much attention to, and you can maybe miss something. Is that where the second piece of this quote comes in?
Yeah, we could be arrogant. We could be taking it for granted, right? And for example, I'm doing this job all the time. I'm doing the status report all the time. I'm writing this presentation all the time, and it's just another routine. I just kind of do a few things, right? Versus, I mean, you hear this expression that, yeah, I'm just 2 years away from retirement. I'm just kind of hang there, right? As opposed to, well, why you are hanging there? Because I've been doing this job for a long time. I'm good at what I do. I just need to do enough. But all of a sudden, that strength becomes a weakness because you lost the humility and the drive to do an extraordinary job, right? To create something that you can really take pride in. Because we create this vision somehow the retirement is a paradise. And if you talk to somebody who actually retired, they probably will tell you fairly quickly retirement is not exactly a paradise per se.
Mr. White, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this discussion, hearing your stories. Where can people go to learn more about you and the work you do, and maybe even read some of your articles if they're available?
So I do have one question for you actually, which is, how did you come up with the idea to reach out to different people and being patient and listening to their stories? So what is the whole idea of this podcast or series?
I think it began when I found out that I really enjoy listening to podcasts. I think that grew as an interest of mine in about the last year or two. And I found that I don't remember if I told you this over the phone the last day or not, but I found that there's a very interesting form of art behind conversation. And I think we were talking earlier about the authentic self and the topics discussed in mastery. There's something really unique about each individual where they have like a weird fascination with some specific thing. And with time, if you could kind of understand that and become a witness of that, you can develop that into a more refined skill. And I noticed that earlier in the school year, I started to realize I had this like fascination with the art of conversation. When I
Mm.
was able to be more open with people and talk to people about like different lessons or just stories about life, I find that when you're talking with people and you bounce off each other, it kind of goes on this interesting tangent and flow that it goes from one idea to the next idea. And when you look back and listen, it's like, how do we talk about all that just in a naturally flowing conversation? So I found that there's a wonderful art to it. And I always enjoyed like learning from people and hearing their stories. And I think having the podcast gives me an opportunity to have a routine behind it where I can every week just sit down once and have a conversation with someone about life. It could be someone well-renowned and very successful that I can learn from, like yourself, or it could even be my friend for the last 10 years, and we sit down and we talk and we still learn from each other things that we didn't know before, which is I think so incredible about these conversations. So I found that I have a joy for it. In addition to that, I also have an interest in growing a business and just working on these kind of projects. So it kind of tied those two interests together. So I thought, I always had in the last summer, I kept thinking in my mind that one day when I'm older, I'll do it. One day when I'm older, I'll start a podcast. But then I think I woke up one morning in October. I'm like, why don't I start it today? There's no, again, I kind of closed that door on myself. So
Really?
I called up a friend. He said, no, he didn't want to do it. Then I called up another friend. He said, yes. And I was surprised. Okay, we filmed it. He didn't want me to release it. So I'm like, okay, this is hard. It's hard to actually do this. Then I called one more friend and he said, yes, we filmed it. I posted it. And then since then, every week I release an episode. And here we are, I don't know, 7, 8 months later, and it's still going. And I'm really happy with it.
Wow, fantastic. I congratulate you for having that curiosity, but the ability to actually, the ability and the persistence to turn the curiosity into concrete actions. And that is fantastic. Thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Okay, great.
If you enjoyed that episode, then you're going to love this episode right here. Make sure you click here to watch that video and don't forget to like and subscribe.